Good afternoon. Today, my guest is Cara Jones, the director of an extraordinary film, Blessed Child. Cara, welcome.
Thank
Nice to
you.
be with you. Um, just to start, obviously, Blessed Child is an incredibly personal story since it's your story. Um, and I know audiences appreciate films that are really authentic and really personal and sort of sharing without boundaries. Um, so, yet the film is about you and your family, and so there's inevitably a balance there. How did you balance the your integrity as a filmmaker with sensitivity to your family?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was a journey, is the short answer. I started this project thinking that I was going to interview a lot of different people who were raised in the Unification Church the way that I was and profile different experiences. And the more I got into it and found myself going back into environments that I was raised in that were somewhat triggering, the more I discovered, oh, this is more personal than I thought. And the story that I have the most access to is my own. And I felt that as a filmmaker, to be in integrity with the story I was telling, I had to really dig deep. And so I went from this is a story about everyone to maybe this is a story about my family, and beginning my journey, really holding myself and my parents as my parents more as the crazy people and me as the sane one. And
Which is true of every child and parent.
yes. Um, and and we had various cuts where I was sort of highlighting my parents' crazy and my sanity. And that started to feel out of integrity because it didn't feel totally true. And what was beautiful about the journey was that it forced me to listen to my parents and listen to their stories in a deeper way and understand that while this whole experience growing up in the Unification Church was not for me, it did provide some healing for my parents and something beneficial for them. And I learned how to sit with my truth and their truth at the same time and recognize that we could find a way to connect more honestly and still, because so much of what held us together, our relationship together when I was younger, was this belief system. And so it felt like if I left, I couldn't hold on to that relationship. And making this film helped me discover that through honesty, I could still be connected with them, even if we didn't believe the same things. And while early cuts of the film were kind of making them or demonizing them in some way, um, I got to the point with the support of other voices that were instrumental truly in making this happen. It was just like, tell the story the way it is. It's complex. It's not black and white. It
Right.
was good for them. It didn't work for me. They're not your typical cult follower stereotype, nor am I. And let's just tell the truth and let people decide.
And what was their response to the film?
Well, I give them a lot of credit because the filming happened over about 5 years intensively. And there were various interviews. I would bring the camera to family reunions and
Always a
always have this
popular party
always
trick,
have
I'm
this
sure.
awkward time where I would sit them down to ask questions. And you'd think sometimes when the camera's in the room, that's when you are more likely to kind of put on a show. But it actually was having the camera in the room allowed me to have the courage to ask questions that I might not. And so over the course of 5 years, I asked them many questions. And over the course of the 5 years, the questions got deeper. And all the while, they were trusting me to share a version of the film that felt good to me. And I remember my mom saying, I just hope that you'll tell the story that in 20 years you'll be proud of. And I feel like I got there. And I'm so glad that I didn't share earlier cuts of the film
Right.
because that could have really done some damage. And so I
Right.
waited until I felt like this is a true complex story in the way that I wanted it to be shared. And then I called them and I prepared them with all the things that might be hard for them about the film ahead of time. And then I went to a yoga class while they watched it.
Right.
And I'll never forget coming out of the yoga class. We had planned to talk at a specific time because I knew I wouldn't sleep that night
Right.
if
Of
I
course.
was like waiting for the next day. And I came out of the yoga class and they had left me this voicemail that basically said, you did it.
That's amazing. I mean,
And not that
and
they still
also I
weren't
can,
uncomfortable, not that they still weren't uncomfortable at certain
right.
things, but they were like, you did it. And they were proud of how I handled everything, even if some of the things were a little uncomfortable.
That, well, I was going to ask you for any tips about filming, um, which many documentarians do with, the people closest to you, and how you prepare them to see the film, and your idea of giving them first an outline of these are things I know you're going to find difficult, I think is a really good idea.
Yeah, and then also be surprised that the things that you think might be hard for them might not be. And but there might be something else that you didn't
Right,
even
of
think
course. Well,
would be
right, yeah.
hard for them, which is basically what happened. But
And
yeah,
in terms of the movie, there's I mean, obviously there's a lot of interviews, and there's also some extraordinary archival material. Do you have tips for, well, maybe you can tell us some about how you identified and gathered what you wanted to use, and maybe offer some tips for filmmakers, because this is a big thing, obviously, in the world of documentaries, how to access and hone in on the archival material you want and then clear it where necessary.
yeah. So I think the core of that answer for me was around relationship and building trust. Uh, as it relates to the Unification Church, most of the media that has been created has fallen into two extremes. One was um, more slanderous content from outside media agencies, and the other was like internally generated propaganda of
Right. Right.
sorts. And so I made the case. So because my parents were elders in the church, I did have the advantage of knowing some people from my own upbringing and from their history with the church. In particular, one person who was president at the time of the church, and making the case of, look, well, so first there was a basis of relationship, which not everyone has, but I made a really strong case. I took him out to lunch. I had a proposal written out as to why a more complex story needed to be told and why he should trust me to be able to tell that complex story. And on the foundation of that, while I did get some pushback from other leaders who tried to step in along the way, I was able to get access to incredible archival footage, as well as access to modern day activities and events that otherwise,
Right.
members of the press might not have access to.
Um, and I, in my experience in the marketplace distributing movies is that audiences are tremendously interested um, in films about cults.
Mhm.
And given your experience, both in and out, do you have any wisdom as to why this is a topic that is of continual interest?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm working on a book at the moment, and I had pitched it as this story of self-discovery. And an agent that I'm working with was like, look, there's a million stories of self-discovery,
Right.
but you actually have a cult story, and cult escape memoirs are among the most popular. And so I thought about this question, and I don't know the exact answer other than I think subconsciously we all know that we are controlled by forces culturally around us. I think that every family is a cult, our culture is a version of a cult. And so when we see exaggerated versions of this and we see how people leave them, there's some, it tugs on our human desire and impulse to be more free. And we're attracted to stories of people who find greater freedom because there's a way that whether we grew up in a cult or we grew up in a specific kind of family or religion or culture, there's a way that those influences can have cult-like influences on all of us.
Interesting. Because the thing that was in my mind, which I guess could map alongside of that, is that we, everyone has some voyeuristic qualities. Like I made a movie a long time ago about the early days of the National Enquirer, and it the thing that gave the founding publisher the idea to create the National Enquirer was being on the New Jersey Turnpike and seeing the rubbernecking that happens at a traffic accident. Just the just voyeuristic what's happened. And to me, seeing films, but it's not so dissimilar from what you're saying, I guess, about cults, is it's fascinating and it's thank God that's not me. But if you were seeing a film about people in outer space, I mean, that's so not me that it wouldn't be that relevant. But I guess
Right.
the that it's, one or two steps away. So it's kind of what you're saying, which is it's close enough to feel relevant and yet far enough away that you can look and feel a sigh of relief about yourself for the moment.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes, both of
So
those
interesting.
things.
Anything I can answer for you?
Um, I would love to hear more of your experience with first time filmmakers, people, because I created one documentary. I'm not probably a, um, I'm probably not a lifelong documentarian. My next thing will be a book. I'm a storyteller with different mediums.
Right.
But people often ask me because made a documentary, what does it take to actually get a documentary out there in the world? And so I'd love to hear more of your experience with especially for first time filmmakers, what helps them go the distance with a film. And then also for people like me who've made a film, that came out 5 years ago plus now, what is it that helps a film continue to have relevance after its
Right.
premiere?
Um, the second question I think is a little easier. I mean, your film is an evergreen. It's not a immediate news ripped from the headlines kind of story that will be supplanted by something else tomorrow or next week. It's not time sensitive. It's timeless, really. I mean, it's your personal journey. So I think um, films uh, that aren't rooted in a specific timeliness have a much better shot of having a long life. And part of what we try to do is find new reasons for audiences to discover films. So um, part of the point of having Q&As with filmmakers is it's yet another piece of information about the film that maybe somebody missed it the first time it was out, or they're coming across it now, but it gives them a little more context for what the film is about. In terms of first-time filmmakers, it's a lot of, to me, it's a, a again another kind of delicate balance that I think filmmakers who refuse or who I think you have to have tremendous faith in the movie you're making and in the story you're telling and incredible persistence and resistance to being thwarted. Having said that, I also think that you need to listen to the marketplace around you. And in your example, people you showed cuts of the film to gave you advice and you listened to them. Many people won't do that
Mm,
because they feel too wedded to their own vision and can't handle or don't want any outside influence. And I think that's often ruinous because I think the market writ large has certain wisdom. And if many people see your film and say, I don't really like it, or that seems to me too generic, or I want to see more of you, or I want to see less of this, or more. That, maybe you're not going to make that change, but it's important to listen and at least synthesize that information. And then rather than have a knee-jerk reaction that you're going to reject all advice, you're going to listen and you're going to evaluate. And I think the filmmakers who are able to do that, to keep true to the film each of them wants to make, and yet are open to hearing comments from people they trust,
mhm.
um, end up making films that have appeal for more than themselves. And
Abs-
that's, I think, the goal.
mm.
I mean, for many people, I guess that's not the goal. And it's about the process of making the film they want to make, and that's fantastic. But that's very hard to find an audience for. Whereas films that take into account how an audience might respond or questions that are unanswered, um, I think those have a much better shot at a life. So if you make
Great
another
answer.
film, call me. So
And it
what's the
takes a
new? Do
village. It takes
you
a
have a
village.
yeah? Do you have a title for your book?
The working title right now is Rewritten. What if the story you're born into is not the one you're here to live? And it's bringing my storytelling background. It's kind of held together by a series of prompts that the reader could consider for
Right.
themselves, but it's a deeper version of the story I told in the film, a little more
So it's not
personal.
rewritten, colon, my escape from a cult. Yeah.
It's not yet, but chances are, by the
Right.
time I listen to enough people,
Right.
it probably will be. And,
Right.
I think I've softened on that because, I have a cool hook. I want people to experience, like, I wanted people to experience the film, and you have to kind of go with the hook,
Right.
which was really like a family healing story. And this is a personal healing story that I'll probably have to bring the
Well, I
cult
mean, you see
hook to
my
as well.
approach to names. The name of my company is the Film Sales Company. You know, I want to get at, I want it to be out there what I think I'm doing. So, um,
Exactly.
best of luck, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Andrew.
Nice
Great to
seeing
chat
you.
with you. You
Bye.
too. Bye.